Good afternoon. I'm Stas Margaronis with the American Journal of Transportation, and we are talking to Jennifer Carpenter, the CEO of the American Waterways Operators and also the American Maritime Partnership. Good afternoon, Jennifer.
Good afternoon, Stas. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Jennifer, the Jones Act is back in the news in a big, big way. The president issued a waiver back in March, and he has now extended that waiver, and that is causing concern among a lot of people in the waterways operators industry and the tug and barge industry, also with mariners who work in the Jones Act trades, as well as shipbuilders and a lot of ancillary operators who rely on the Jones Act. Jennifer, I know that you just got back from a visit up on the Hill this morning, but if you could maybe just start by telling us who AWO and AMP are.
Sure thing. So, AWO, my day job, is the association that represents America's tugboat, towboat, and barge industry. Folks who own and operate towing vessels and barges throughout our inland river system, on all three coasts, on the Great Lakes, provide essential ship docking and other harbor services in ports and harbors around the country. AMP, the American Maritime Partnership, is my side hustle. And AMP is a coalition that really brings together all of the entities throughout the U.S. domestic maritime industry in support of one goal, and that is the Jones Act. So, vessel owners, maritime labor, shipyards, pro-defense organizations, we come together for one purpose, and that is to defend the Jones Act. AWO has a handful of priorities, the Jones Act at the top of the list. AMP is where we focus solely on the Jones Act.
Understood. Thank you very much. Okay. Jennifer, you were on the Hill moments ago. Tell us what's going on and what is the response from members of the House and Senate in relationship to this latest waiver of the Jones Act?
Yeah, well, the good news is that I can report from firsthand conversations that there is and remains strong bipartisan support for the Jones Act on Capitol Hill in both the House and the Senate. That is true of lawmakers from around the country, from the key committees of jurisdiction, armed services in the House and Senate, transportation and infrastructure in the House, commerce in the Senate, leadership in the House and Senate. There is strong support for this law. I think that there is broad support for the president's maritime dominance agenda and his goal of making American shipbuilding great again. And there is an understanding that waiving the Jones Act is not the way to do that. I think folks understand that the administration is eager, as we all are, to bring down energy costs for Americans. But I think there is concern, and we certainly have that concern. I look forward to elaborating on it, that this Jones Act waiver is not delivering the energy cost relief that was held out. It is hurting American maritime workers, whether we're talking about mariners or shipyard workers or businesses that have capital that they are ready to invest in America's maritime infrastructure and are holding back. So it's causing these immediate problems. And it really threatens to hollow out the president's maritime dominance agenda. So there is a sense that, yep, this isn't working and we need to right the ship. And I think, folks are asking, how can I help? What's the best way to do that?
Okay. So in March, in the statement that AWO issued, you said, excuse me, the breadth of this waiver is especially concerning as it will unnecessarily impact transportation markets where domestic vessel capacity is not lacking. And you said, as in addition, while there is no appreciable effect on the price of gasoline. Why is this waiver being invoked if there is vessel capacity and it's not going to reduce gasoline prices?
Well, I think we are developing evidence in real time that the next time somebody says, boy, the Jones Act is driving gas prices, we're going to be able to point to and say, no, it doesn't. As we've been saying, gas prices are overwhelmingly driven by the price of crude oil, the impact of domestic transportation overall, much less transportation on Jones Act vessels to markets served by those is less than a tenth of a cent a gallon. So this just pales in comparison even to federal taxes. So we are, the good news here is we are developing some real evidence that we can use to push back on some of these claims. I think that there was a desire to kind of throw everything against the wall and see what can we do to lower costs as they've been rising precipitously. Again, understand that desire. This was the right way to go about it. It's having predictable impacts from our perspective in terms of not providing relief to consumers, but again, really threatening the American maritime industrial base. So the conversation is ongoing about how we can bring this to a close in a way that I want to say, provides flexibility. If a genuine shortage develops in some market, at any time that an American vessel can't meet, there is a surgical procedure that exists in current law that can be used to make sure that we don't have a problem, but also doesn't unnecessarily disenfranchise the American maritime industry, the American maritime worker.
Okay, so why did I understand maybe that there was some concern when the war started. Why now the second waiver?
I think we need to be sober and clear-eyed and recognize that there are folks, including some in the administration, who don't like the Jones Act. There are many who like the Jones Act very much and understand its centrality, its foundational role, in the president's maritime dominance agenda. But there are other folks who just don't like it. And there are folks outside the administration who are making money off this. Just yesterday, a major oil company did its quarterly, call with investors, and they were bragging about how, as a result of this Jones waiver, they were able to move Bakken crude that normally moves by rail, in compliance with U.S. law, I might add, on a foreign flag vessel that is not subject to all those same legal obligations as an American vessel or even an American rail carrier. So, let's not forget that there are folks out there who see an opportunity to make a buck on this, and they've got some sympathetic ears within the administration.
So, is it safe to say that the oil companies are one of the groups that wants this waiver of the Jones Act?
We have seen oil companies, oil traders, I would say, who see this waiver as an opportunity to make some money, and they are doing that. We have seen foreign governments who, by the way, are not coming to our assistance in reopening the Strait of Hormuz, but are happy to have their vessels, moving cargo between U.S. ports under this waiver. We've got some of the usual ideological opponents of the Jones Act who see it as an impediment to free markets. We would say there is robust competition within the domestic fleet under U.S. law, under the same ground rules.
Okay, so a couple of those organizations that you refer to have made the allegation that there are regions of the United States that in wintertime don't get enough oil, and that they are deprived, and that they need to have a foreign flag come in there because the domestic market can't get in there. Is there a region of the United States where the delivery of petroleum products is impinged by the Jones Act?
No. And then so my answer is no. And now let's sort of break this down. We are watching very carefully, markets throughout the United States to make sure that shortages don't develop because of the very significant disruption in the global oil and petroleum products market. So, for example, there are West Coast markets, Alaska, which is very close to Asia, closer to Asia than to the US Gulf, that gets 20-30% of its supply from Asia under normal circumstances. Asian countries right now, because they get much of their oil from the Middle East through the Strait of Hormuz, are holding on to those products for their own use. And so we're very carefully watching to make sure that Alaska has the supply that it needs. So I want to be clear here, the Jones Act is not an impediment to this market getting what it needs, but it gets some of what it needs under normal circumstances from overseas markets that right now are in a problematic situation. So we're keeping a close eye on that because we want to make sure that US vessels are used to the maximum extent to meet those needs. That is what is happening now. And again, if a shortage develops that a US vessel can't meet, then there is a targeted waiver process that can be used. California, which has some, not a history of building pipelines, some unique regulatory requirements in terms of the gasoline blends and things like that that are required, is another market that we're watching closely. We've not seen shortages there. We're watching it. I'm going to just note, you and I have talked before about the commercial hovercraft rules. Right now, the commercial hovercraft rules are preventing, yes, the commercial hovercraft rules are preventing US flag ATVs from serving the California market. That is a problem. That's the kind of thing that should fall into the easy bucket before we would even consider looking at a foreign flag vessel coming in, that we would make sure that we have freed up all available US vessels to do that. And then last thing I'm going to say on this point is that we are currently seeing, so we have not seen shortages develop on the West Coast. We're watching it closely. We are seeing, in fact, exports from the West Coast. We have seen diesel, at the same time as we're watching out to make sure that California doesn't see a diesel shortage, we have seen tankers loaded in California moving diesel to Australia. Why is that happening? Because in this disrupted global market that we're seeing right now, there is money to be made there. They are paying a premium for it. So there's nothing wrong with the barrels following the dollar, but everybody needs to be sober and clear-eyed and recognize that the Jones Act is really a minor, kind of factor in these large transportation flows. This is a global market, and this global disruption has done much more to determine how barrels flow around the US. Waiving the Jones Act has not resulted in an influx of additional petroleum products to the West Coast. They're moving overseas because, again, the arbitrage, it's just there's too much money to be made elsewhere.
So where are you seeing foreign flag vessels operating in our Jones Act trade right now?
All kinds of places where they are most assuredly not meeting an immediate national defense need, which was the stated legal rationale for the waiver. We have seen a foreign flag vessel move bunkers around Corpus Christi. We have seen moves along the US East Coast. We have seen moves from Washington to California. So we have seen all manner. MARAD, as of my last look, was reporting about 15 voyages that have been conducted under the waiver. I'm currently aware of about 24 fixtures. Not all of those vessels have discharged yet, so they've not been noted on the MARAD website. But we are seeing movement in, sort of throughout the U.S. coastal environment. And these are very much moves of opportunity. Somebody sees an opportunity to use a foreign flag vessel because they can, and they're doing it. And I want to say one more thing here. This is not a victimless situation where, oh, some trader has made a little bit more money. Good for them, I guess. No, we are now seeing, again, American maritime companies losing work. I talked to a member just the other day who lost a contract on a U.S. flag ATB. So this is 22 mariners who are not working on that vessel. A foreign flag vessel is going to get that work.
Jennifer, you mentioned Corpus Christi, U.S. East Coast, and Washington to California. Washington to California.
Yep.
The Corpus Christi, do you know where it's going to?
That was within the port. And there is, Stas, a great website that MARAD maintains. This is a statutory requirement. Now, Congress, as a result, frankly, of concern that Jones Act waivers had been abused in the past, said we need to shine a little sunshine on this. So a couple of Congresses ago, with the National Defense Authorization Act, they said, we're going to require that when a waiver is used, the user report that and MARAD make that information publicly available so that it can be scrutinized and everybody can see who moved what, where, what was the national defense justification. You can do your research from there. I think one of the things I know folks are looking into right now is, where are the crew members from on these vessels? What visas do they have? We're talking a lot about homeland security, border security. We've just cast our maritime border wide open. I think we're just beginning to get a handle on, sort of what the implications of that are.
Jennifer, do you have any idea what flag vessels are being deployed here?
Yes, there are lots of flags of convenience, lots of Marshall Islands. There are European countries that, as I said, have not exactly been assisting us in the Strait of Hormuz. I think it's significant that there are at least 4 vessels, the Shipbuilders Council of America reports, that were built in China. There are other owners who have ties to Chinese interests. So, I mean, this thing is really very contradictory to our homeland and border security goals and our goals of really bolstering American maritime dominance. This just ain't it.
Okay. And again, the first one you could sort of say, well, under the emergency, maybe the administration felt that they needed to be safe rather than sorry. But the second one, I just don't see where the rationale was. Have you been told anything by the administration as to why they believe there's a need?
I don't think we've heard a response that we find satisfactory. I'll say that. Again, I think folks understood, although weren't happy with the boy, we're at war, gotta throw everything at it. Okay, the evidence is clear. This thing isn't working. You don't need to, get up at the White House podium and say, "Boy, that was the wrong decision." You could let it, let it lapse. But the extension of the waiver has really amplified concern in the industry and among industry supporters on Capitol Hill, because it's a long time. If this waiver stays in effect for 5 months, that really is a waiver of unprecedented length. And again, the evidence is just really clear that this thing is not delivering the desired results. And, coming back to the president's maritime dominance agenda, this is a capital intensive industry. Folks need to have clear ground rules. They need to know that before they invest capital, in a shipyard or in a vessel that's going to be out on the water for 25 years, that the ground rules aren't going to change. So, a 5 month waiver has a destabilizing impact, that something like a short-term waiver because a need can't be met, or is just, it's not the same thing at all qualitatively. So alarm bells are really going up. Like I said, the good news is strong bipartisan support on Capitol Hill, and I think folks are want to act effectively on this.
Okay. The question I have to ask you is, do you see a potential possibility that these waivers will become permanent?
I think that making the waivers permanent would be a disaster for Homeland Security, for our economy, and I do not see that happening. I think that the extension of this waiver has really galvanized, concern that we need to stop this ASAP, that it's problematic. Now, I will tell you, because I want everybody in our industry to be very clear-eyed about this. We should understand that there are people out there who would like to see the Jones Act go away permanently. And they would like to do that. That can't be done without an act of Congress, and I don't see that happening because there is strong support for that. So I think everybody needs to be, and everybody is, energized and engaged and working this issue hard, and they should be. Everybody should be treating this as a Mayday situation, not panicking, not freaking out, but really, seizing this opportunity. We got to do two things here, Stas, as an industry. We need to minimize damage to the domestic maritime industry and the people who work in it in the short term. I do not want to see any more, American companies losing contracts, American mariners losing work, American shipyards and investors who are ready to spend saying, I can't do that right now. That is a problem. We got to minimize that. And then in the longer term, we got to work as a united industry to make sure that the Jones Act emerges stronger for this experience. And for the evidence that we are compiling, that this has not benefited consumers, that it has enabled some folks to make money at the expense of consumers and the American maritime industry. It has not advanced the president's maritime agenda. We need to make sure that the next time somebody proposes something like this, remember when that got tried back in 2026 and, it was not successful at all. Let's not go down that road again.
Okay. I have seen that there have been moves by unions and different organizations to create a specific coalition to address this waiver, that unions and other maritime groups and companies have been getting together. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I will just say, this is an all hands on deck situation. And so I say this from an AWO perspective, I say this from an AMP perspective, we welcome the active engagement of everybody in our industry on this issue. We have all got to be as effective as we can be within our spheres of influence, and we need to coordinate carefully. So what do I mean by that? The shipyards are energized, maritime labor is energized, vessel owners in every segment of the industry are energized, from inland to coastal to offshore to Great Lakes. Everybody is energized. We all bring slightly different strengths to the table. We all have, regional and other, political allies and friends. And so I think this is a time, for everybody to work hard with their friends, work hard in their localities, work hard again in their spheres of influence, and then for all of us to coordinate and share information so that as I learn this over here from my meetings on the Hill, I'm sharing that with my friends in the shipyards or my friends in labor, and they're doing the same thing. And we are all pooling that knowledge and using it so that we can be as effective as possible.
So, do you see that this could be a prolonged effort on your part?
I think we absolutely need to see this as a prolonged effort because of those two goals that I mentioned. The short-term objective is to make sure, is to minimize the harm from this waiver and its extension to our industry. So that's a battle that's going to be taking place, between now and August when this thing is set to lapse. And we need to make darn sure that it does. But there is a longer term there is a longer term really war that needs to be fought here, and we need to make sure that we are really applying all of the learnings of this experience, and we're both using them when it ends, like, okay, what did we just learn from that? The waiver is over, and what did we just learn from that? And we need to be, documenting that and making that clear while the memory is fresh. But then we also need to be using that to educate for the future again, so that, the next time something happens, the balloon goes up, the stuff hits the fan, hopefully there are fewer people saying, oh, maybe we need a Jones Act waiver. And those who are saying maybe we need a Jones Act waiver are being effectively rebutted by a larger group of folks who are saying, no way, we tried that and it was a loser.
Do you think that this is an issue that your coalition will be uh, driving towards during the midterm elections?
Absolutely. Elections are an important time when politicians want to listen to voters. And voters throughout the maritime industry have something to say, which is no on these waivers. They are bad. They are bad for workers. They are bad for voters, in communities where maritime transportation is important to the economy. We need to take the opportunity of our elected officials, needing to hear from their voters to make sure that they are.
Very good. Uh, Jennifer, we talked about this before, but one of the questions that I keep coming up with is, are we ever going to see passage of the Ships Act?
Well, I guess a good start today was, the House voting to reopen the Department of Homeland Security. We've got the Coast Guard back online. So now we'll have mariners who will be able to upgrade their licenses and vessel owners that'll be able to document vessels and Coast Guard, stations that will not be running out of water or gas and all the stuff that we were seeing over the last couple of months. So that's important. But, quite seriously, my point here is Congress has been struggling to get fundamental things done, like funding one of the largest departments in the government. So I think we need to be clear-eyed about the prospects for movement of the Ships Act this year. But I will say, let the Ships Act is very important, and we need to continue to push for that. The Jones Act is the foundation. I look at the Ships Act as, we're going to put a couple additional stories on our house, and we want to do that. That's good. The Jones Act is the foundation. If we weaken that foundation, what are we doing even talking about extra stories? So I think we've got to attend to first things first, and we got to end this Jones Act waiver, and we need to make sure that everybody understands the importance of the ability of our country to control its own supply chain using American vessels, American workers, and then let's build on that and pass the Ships Act.
Okay. And along those lines, do you think the maritime industry needs to be more organized than it is in order to prevent the kind of eventualities that you've discussed?
I think that excellent communication and coordination is absolutely essential to our future success. So let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that we've all got to be part of the same organization, that there's like a mothership that needs to control everything. In fact, I think that it can be quite healthy when we have multiple voices, speaking from overlapping and mutually reinforcing perspectives. A shipbuilder has a slightly different take on things than a maritime labor union, than an inland barge operator. And that's just fine. We're all saying the same thing when it comes to the Jones Act, which is this is the foundation of our industry, and this waiver is bad for it. So as long as we're coordinating, sharing information, learning from each other, I say those multiple voices, good. If our friends need to hear it from three people instead of one, they should be, because this is a big deal, and we need to be loud about it.
Very good. Jennifer Carpenter, you have been, as always, an education on this issue, and a passionate advocate. I want to thank you very much for your time, and best wishes for the future, especially since this obviously is not going away anytime soon. It looks like it's going to be a prolonged effort here.
We got our work cut out for us. So I hope all your listeners, all your viewers are ready to get their hands dirty, because we need the help.
Okay. I'm Stas Margaronis with the American Journal of Transportation. We've been talking with Jennifer Carpenter, the CEO of the American Waterways Operators and the American Maritime Partnership. Jennifer, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stas.